side of the room. Are we sitting on the other side?
There's still room here.
Anybody can have my seat because I'm going up, right? That looks good. Did you start it already?
Yeah.
Put you on the hot seat.
I'm excited. All right.
I'll go down afterwards so you know. Yeah, I'll go down afterwards so you know. Pastor, you can open this.
Okay.
Good evening. Welcome to Ebenezer. We are delighted to have so many come out for this evening's town hall. I'm going to open with prayer this evening, and then we will have Ms. Melinda Lyons, who is President and CEO of the Hill CDC, to come and officially open our program. Let us pray. God of all people, God who loves us all, we thank you for your presence here with us on this evening. May your presence, O God, be a blessing to us all, reminding us, O God, that we ought to be quick to listen and slow to speak, that we should be kind, that we should be gentle, that we should be patient with one another. Help us, O God, to find common good, O God, the benefits that are for all. Bless the words that will be spoken, O God, that they will be helpful and not hurtful. We ask now that you would bless in a special way our Congresswoman who has come to conversate and dialogue with us on this evening. May you be pleased with all that occurs. This is our prayer. Amen.
Good evening. Good evening. Thank you for being here. Welcome to the historic Hill District. My name is Melinda Lyons, President and CEO of the
this many people here on
Development Corporation.
No, well, tell them you got to come back. You came here today, you got to come back.
Our organization is committed to developing the Greater Hill District in an equitable manner that uplifts, centers, and protects our existing residents. The Hill District is a vibrant community renowned for its civic engagement, rich culture, thriving commerce, and, of course, spirited residents, many of whom are present tonight. Shout out to those from the Hill District. One of the many things the Hill CDC strives to do is connect our residents directly with its elected officials so that their voices are heard and needs are responded to accordingly. Tonight's town hall is a result of the Hill District community's expression of concern about activities happening at the federal level and the Hill CDC's specific request to representatively to come to the Hill District. We are grateful for Representative Lee's response to our call. opportunity to make your voice heard and ask your most pressing questions. We know that many of you are overwhelmed and trying to find a sense of stability and clarity during these rapidly changing times. Tonight marks an important moment in the public dialogue for our communities. Before we begin tonight's event, I would like to acknowledge and thank the individuals who made today possible. First and foremost, thank you to Ebenezer Baptist Church and Pastor Campbell. And his team for graciously allowing us all to use this beautiful sanctuary for tonight's necessary conversation. Thank you to our elected officials and community leaders from the city of Pittsburgh, from the county and state, all of whom are either a part of or connected to the Pennsylvania 12th Congressional District. Please stand.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I lose my voice a lot.
In Washington, D.C., and to answer your questions. Because we have a large crowd and limited time together, we have structured the Q&A portion of our agenda to accommodate as many questions as possible. Question and comment cards can be found in each Bible rack in the pews, or ask an usher, you can raise your hands, if you cannot find one. Please write your name and your question. Due to time constraints, not all questions will be able to get answered tonight. However, all questions will be shared with Congresswoman Lee in her office. We kindly request that all attendees follow this process to ensure a respectful and productive discussion. To ensure a productive evening and safety, we cannot tolerate disruptive behavior, and we ask for your cooperation in ensuring such. As we seek answers to questions tonight, it is important to remain anchored in our collective power. We have navigated challenging seasons in the past, and our strength has always been in uniting as a community and supporting one another. We will have to do that more now than ever. Now, I am pleased to introduce to you the representative for Pennsylvania's 12th Congressional District.
Thank you, sir.
Born and raised in Pittsburgh's Mon Valley, Congresswoman Summer Lee was elected to Congress in 2022 and is the first Black woman ever elected to Congress in Pennsylvania. Congresswoman Lee sits on two committees, Oversight and Accountability, and Education and Workforce. She is also the ranking member of the Oversight Subcommittee on Federal law
They let me do it.
Throughout her time in office, Congresswoman Lee has focused her efforts on working families and being a champion for campaign finance reform, environmental justice, and gender, racial, and economic equity. She advocates for workers' rights, unions, and for a livable wage. Please join me in welcoming the Hill District and Pennsylvania's 12th Congressional District Representative, Summer Lee.
Let's do it.
The program is right here if you need to receive it.
I'm going to just take this off now because I know I need to be mobile as we keep ourselves in fighting terms in this moment. Thank you so much. I want to echo the thank yous. I want to get as much as we can get. Let me echo the thank you so much to the Hill CDC, to Sister Marimba Malayans, and everybody who helped us to put this together. Thank you, of course, to Ebenezer, to our pastor who are graciously allowed us to be here. And thank you to each and every one of you. Let's get into it because I know that there are so much that we're going through and so many things that we are going to get through. And tonight is one of those days and those opportunities that we have to strategize, to learn from each other how we are going to get ourselves through times that are, we say unprecedented a lot, but times that are trying in a government that doesn't always reflect what we want, what our district may have voted for. I don't think I have to tell you all the moment or explain the moment that we've been in, but as somebody who has been living in it from DC, I would love to share the insight as much as I can about how it has been since January 20th. But before I get there, I want to say thank you because in my 2 years that I have served in this role, it has been the honor of my life to be able to go to DC and fight for working people, to elevate the voices of the vulnerable and the marginalized, people who have rarely had their voices heard in places of power, people who have rarely been able to come to DC. Whether or not you've been able to come to DC, it has been our endeavor to ensure that we can still represent you. So I want to shout out my staff, the people who make our office run every single day, who have answered thousands upon thousands of calls, particularly in the last month or two. But before that, calls to help folks with Social Security or Veterans Affairs or even your passports, to help talk through with our municipal leaders around our district, which is quite a large district, PA 12, from the entire city of Pittsburgh down into the Mon Valley, into the South Hills, and even as far out into Westmoreland County, as far east as Jeanette. That is the diversity of our district. We have urban, exurban, and suburban. We are more than half not the city. We have people of all political ideologies in this district, so don't let people believe you when they say that we only represent one type of person. We represent all types of people. And what we have heard in talking to those people, what we have gleaned from the information that folks have shared with us over the last couple of months, of not just the last couple of years, but especially the last couple of months, is that they're worried, that they're afraid, and that they don't like the direction that we're going. And we've had thousands of calls about Medicaid in particular, about cuts to federal workers, about cuts to research, cancer research, things like that. The Department of Education, you may have heard the news tonight, that Trump has vowed to eliminate the Department of Education. We know that we're a district that voted for public education, for strong public education, so that all children, irrespective of their zip code, should be educated in the wealthiest nation on earth without impediment. And that fight continues on. We've met with people both in DC and in districts who have echoed these concerns. We've met people in the streets through actions and organizing. We were proud to be able to join people to protect our sciences and NIH, to let folks know in our region how important NIH research is, not just to Western Pennsylvania and the country, the whole country. Because what is the United States if we're not on the vanguard of cancer research or Alzheimer's research, of scientific endeavor and discovery. That's what makes us the nation that we are. And to see those things clawed back is frightening, and we're lifting them up because we know how important it is to us. What we are here to talk about are not just what we've been through and what we're going through, but also what we can do. So just really quickly, I want to know how many of you all are someone who stands to lose your benefits or know someone who has lost their benefits? Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, Veterans Affairs. How many of you are a federal worker or know a federal worker who may have lost their jobs? Know someone who has benefited from cancer research? The Trump administration wants you to think that he has a mandate to do these things. He wants you to believe that because of an election result that he has the power or he has the ability to go through and slash and cut whatever he wants. And what he is counting on is that there will be no pushback. He's counting on the fact that even with all three branches of government, the House, the Senate, the executive branch, and the Supreme Court, that there is nobody who will stand in his pathway to stop him on his journey to erode and to claw back and to cut back everything that we care about and that we love. Why we're having this is because we're here to say that that is not true. That there is still on today the final fail-safe in our democracy. It is the people. It is the people. We're here today to talk through this town hall, not just to give you information, to take your questions, but to also to remind you all where power still lies in this system. What we've seen over the last couple of months has been irresponsible. It's been chaotic. It's been cruel on purpose. And don't believe that just because something is cruel that it can't also be incompetent at the same time. Just that because something seems to be wrong that they can't also not know what they're doing. Of the thousands of federal cuts we saw, we have also saw things that have happened to turn it back. So when people, I know one of the questions you all are going to ask is, what are we doing? What is happening? How are we fighting back? Well, listen, legislative is one way. We know that there aren't going to be many bills that are going to put a check on Donald Trump's power that he's going to sign into law. And we recognize that, and it will not stop us, and it cannot stop us. We also know that throughout history tells us that where we see movement in our government, whether it's the Civil Rights Act or the Voting Rights Act or women's suffrage or rights for queer and trans people, whatever it has been, it has always come from the people. It has always come from organized people, an educated electorate, and an empowered voting electorate. And that's why we are spending the time to make sure that you all have every tool that you need, that I have every tool that I need. We've seen over the last couple of months, despite Doge and Elon Musk running rampant through our government, but we've also seen efforts to expose what's really happening there. Why is Elon Musk running through our government? It's because he has conflicts of interest. And I'm proud to be on the oversight committee where we have exposed those conflicts, where despite him not having the courage to come and stand before us, that we will call him out every single day until every American, Democrat, Republican, and Independent, all over this country understands who he is in real life. That the real efficiency that he's actually trying to bring about is an efficiency for him to pad his pockets. It's important that we know why people are doing things. We know what their motives are. We've been able to, of course, lead investigations on Doge and the work that he's done. Lead investigations on all of what Trump is trying to do right now. The litigation responses. We've seen litigation responses, over 130 lawsuits. A lot of those lawsuits have actually been going our way. We've seen judges have to say that Donald Trump has to restore federal workers. And we're proud that they said that the 22 or so thousand federal workers who were probationary workers must be reinstated because it was illegal to fire them. We've seen other workers who were reinstated with back pay. So just to say how efficient their government of efficiency has been. They got back with back pay. We've seen them say and strike down the federal freeze, the funding freeze that we know was illegal, that caused chaos reigning throughout the land. We had judges say that that was illegal and that they had to stop that. We've seen them stop some of its executive orders, such as its birthright citizenship, ending birthright citizenships. We've seen judges say that that is illegal. We've heard a judge say that, quote, this is not an autocracy, and you cannot just fire whoever you want. The fight back is happening, and yes, we recognize that there is so much more that we need to do. So I want to take a second before we get into the question and answer to acknowledge what my concerns are and my fears. Is that, yes, we hear the calls that Democrats need to do more. I'm a Democrat in Congress. That we need to show up louder. that we need to show up stronger, that we need to be more clear and direct. I agree. I agree. That when we talk about a failure of leadership, it's okay to acknowledge that we have to do better and that we can do better. But the reality is that yes, the entire Democratic Party has to do better right now. We have to decide in this moment what masters we are going to serve. And the reality is that we cannot serve two masters. We cannot be the party of our own corporate billionaires and the party of working class people at the same time. It is my belief that when we are clear about who we serve, leadership will also be clear. The direction that we want to take this country in will become far more clear. And that's why these moments are so important. It is so important to hear from you so that when you know that when we push back on leadership, because we do, that when we push back on them, we're not pushing back as just a progressive black Dem from Pittsburgh. We're not just pushing back as a squad member. We're pushing back with the power of our electorate, of our demographics. We have a mandate to change the trajectory of our party, and we know that for our democracy to survive, it is important that we do this work. It is important that we do this work. So I'm here to get better. Every day I'm trying to also figure out how I got to do better. We all got to take responsibility right now. And that's why we want to be here. We want to be here so that we can ensure we're proud of the $2 billion that we were able to secure in our first term. But we know that we're operating in a different country on today. So now we have to adapt and figure out the best ways that it is to still serve you. Because it's our job, irrespective of who's in office. We have to figure out ways of fighting back against agencies being gutted. We have to figure out ways to fight back against those crucial cuts to Medicaid or Social Security or the NIH. We still have that mandate. But tonight what we want to do is we want to hear from you. We want to hear your concerns, and to the best of my ability, we will answer them. To the best of our ability, we will answer as many questions as we can. We also want to talk about the actions that we can take, what we are doing in the legislative branch, but also what we need from our community to take action right now. If you are here today, you are probably someone who is already activated. But we want to make sure that we're helping to direct that so that we are having the biggest impact that we can. At the end of this day, I want to be able to take your voices back to DC. I want them to know that even as we're trying to figure out what direction, some people are trying to figure out what direction we're going, and PA-12 is clear. PA-12 is clear about what direction we want to go back, and I want to be able to take your voices back as we make the argument for a Democratic Party and a government that serves working class people, that serves all people irrespective of their zip code or their backgrounds, and that we are preserving our most basic civil liberties as we are doing that. So I thank you all so much for coming tonight. I thank you all so much for the questions in advance. I thank you for your respect as we do this. But also, I thank you for your anger. I thank you for your righteous indignation, because that is welcome here as well. And I don't want you all to think that we don't want that. This is a space where you can do that as well. So I think that the way this is going to go, we're going to have some people start to ask the questions. I think we've seen them collecting them. If throughout this you have a question that comes to your mind, again, raise your hand so that someone can come and get it. If your name is on it, we can also come and get information from you, because whatever we can't get through tonight, our team can still be diligent about answering them even as we leave here. So let's get straight to it.
We want to help you. We want to help you.
Thank you. Lots of them.
Here.
Use the mic.
This question, can you hear me? All right. This question is from, we're going to ask everyone to stand. Whoever asks a question, please stand.
If you feel.
Comfortable. If you're not, that's fine. Okay. Leanne Goncher. How will Congress save the Department of Education and student loan forgiveness, IDR plans?
Thank you so much for that question. I will start by saying that I am something like 90% sure that I am the member of Congress with the largest student loan debt. I mean, I'm not even saying that as an accomplishment, but it is to say to remind that we are now in Congress, and I think there was a time where I could tell you how many members of Congress had student loan debts because it's literally, we can probably count it on the one hand, very few. So very few people are even considering the impact of Trump's chaos on student loans. So just to frame what's happening right now, as I talked about the Department of Education today, just today, Donald Trump signed another executive order to dismantle the Department of Education. What he said, the assurance that he said, is that they're giving it back to the states and that they will still reserve the power of the federal government to implement Title I programs, implement federal student loans, Pell Grants, and IDEA, which is the law that ensures that every student with a disability is still able to access a free and appropriate education. But what we know is that, well, first of all, let's say what we know. What is Congress going to do? Well, what we really need is for Republicans to grow a spine. The reality is, and I'm going to say this because I'm going to say this a couple of times, we cannot have a dictatorship unless the Republicans in the House and the Senate say and give up their power as a co-equal branch of government. And we need to be putting pressure on them to remind them of why we are a co-equal branch of government. That's what it takes. Because the reality is that Donald Trump actually does not have the legal power to dismantle a federal agency that was authorized by an act of Congress, and the Department of Education is the perfect example of that. He does not actually have the legal power to do so. So what he's actually trying to do right now is to piecemeal take it apart. And he's firing staff. So that what ends up happening is that even though he hasn't gotten rid of the Department of Education legally, what's happening is that there is no capacity to actually implement the programs. And as we are fighting through our next budget fights, that they're deprioritizing the federal government being one of the financiers of public education in our country, right? That's their ultimate goal. Their ultimate goal is to dismantle public education at the Department of Education, public education, so that we can have a privatized system, so that people like Jeff Yass and other billionaires who are vested in the economic model of education can be able to do that. So that's the number one. We know that the courts are probably going to say that that is not legal and that he can't do that. But what we really need to do is we need people right now to understand what the Department of Education actually does. We need people to understand what the implications will be if the federal government is no longer funding or participating in public education at the rate that it is right now. And they're trying to tell you all that if we just put public education back to the states, then that means that the states should rightfully be able to do it. But the problem is that the states rely heavily on federal dollars. Heavily. In Pittsburgh Public School itself, I think that that the federal government provides about $4,000 per child at least. The state of Pennsylvania, those numbers are similar. We rely on the federal government to provide dollars. If we cut it, this is what you can expect. If the federal government does not fund public education at the rate that it does now, or they dismantle the Department of Education, you, the taxpayer, will shoulder that burden. We have a property tax scheme in this state and largely around the country where the burden of funding public education largely falls on the taxpayer, the property taxes. And because we have a municipal school district system, municipality by municipality. So if you live in school districts like Woodland Hills or Penn Hills or Wilkinsburg, the city of Pittsburgh, you can imagine that your property taxes will skyrocket. And I imagine that you all don't want that to happen. But the problem is that Elon Musk and the people who are running this whole scheme, they actually don't understand the implications. It's why we see them doing something and then having to backtrack. So what we need to do and what we're trying to do right now is to sound the alarm. We have to sound the alarm so that people, especially in Republican districts, rural communities rely on the Department of Education. All families with disabilities, with students with disabilities, rely on the Department of Education. All low-income families across the country through Title I schools rely on the Department of Education for implementation and for oversight of these programs. So if we get rid of those things, everybody is going to be impacted. So we need more participation. Last week, they went to the Department of Education offices here in Pittsburgh. I couldn't come because I had a cold. But we will be back out to keep sounding the alarm on this because really what we're going to have to rely on is Donald Trump not disobeying the courts. So that's going to bring another question. We don't have to ask it yet. But the next question is what happens when Donald Trump disobeys the courts? When Donald Trump disobeys the courts, it's going to be up to us to put parameters on him. The reality is that there is not a quick legislative fix. But if the people of this country will not abide him stepping over on our checks and balances, then we can put parameters on what we will allow him to do. When they hear from us, when they hear that districts across the country actually did not want the Department of Education to be dismantled, when we hear from our states attorneys generals, people like that will be rising up in a chorus very soon. We need that to happen very fast. We need people to get out information about what the impacts, how far-reaching they are going to be. But as for my Republican colleagues, I'm sorry, I will say I don't have a lot of faith in them being the parameter. I don't. And that's really unfortunate. It's really unfortunate because their districts rely on this too. So that is as best of an answer that I can give you to that.
Next question over here. This is from Veronica Pat. There you are. Thank you for the question. Thank you for being a fighter. We need 100 more like you in Congress! Exclamation point. There's more. Most Democrats in Congress are not meeting the moment of this crisis. What do they need to be doing differently? And how can we, the people, help?
Okay. Listen. I don't underestimate how hard a question that is and how hard a time this is. We talk a lot about how we are in moments that we have never been in, and that's very true. We are. There are a lot of people in Congress, in state houses, in government who have been there for a very long time, and that institutional knowledge is typically very, very important. But the reality is that the things that worked for us even 2 years ago cannot work in a failing democracy. And we're in a failing democracy right now. I've said a lot that if you, however you are reacting to this moment, you are likely underreacting. You are likely underreacting, and I don't take that lightly because I also don't want to cause fear. I want to spur people to action, to feeling empowered, but not feeling so crippled by just the weight of what's happening that we step back. And I think that that's what's happening in Congress too. I'll use this as an example. For me, myself, as somebody who is largely very local. When I was in the State House, shout out to my sister rep, Sarah, who was there at the time. Latasha, you weren't there yet. And we were trying to get police accountability across the finish line after Antoine Rose. And we knew it wasn't going to go anywhere because we were in a minority, of course. We were then in the minority in both the House and the Senate at the time, and we couldn't get these bills across the finish line. And then we had the crazy idea to just take the rostrum and stage an action. So I called all of my colleagues and I said, get to work on time because we're not going to session. We're just going to go in and we're going to take the House. Which maybe that was well thought out, maybe it wasn't. But we did it. And we got there and we were able to take it and we were able to hold it until the Speaker of the House said, we said we will not move until you move something on this. Now, we had a different incentive base there because we did have a per diem then, so they couldn't get paid until we clocked in. So they didn't like that. But anyways, needless to say, we were able to get some bills crossed. Not all the bills that we wanted, but some bills. And then the State of the Union happened and I was paralyzed. Even I was paralyzed. As active as I am, as vocal as I am. And I sat in that room, and I'm not going to lie, and I looked across at the other side, and it looked like a lynch mob. And it felt like a lynch mob. And when people talk about what would you have done in the 60s, in the 50s, in the 40s, and we all say that we would do the best and we'd all do the most, and when you're actually confronted with it and when you actually think about what are the implications, we're not talking about right now are they just going to take a member of Congress out. We're talking about right now they might send American citizens to El Salvador. And it doesn't mean that we shouldn't be willing to stand and go, but it does mean that I had to get my bearings. And there are a lot of people who have to get their bearings, and there are a lot of people who don't want to get their bearings. They don't want to, and they can't. There are a lot of people right now who don't want to disrupt because we have, as a Democratic Party, valued decorum so much. So what I'm going to ask is that we as Democrats here, before we even get to them ones, we have to redefine the type of leadership that we want. We do. Because when I talked about, as a progressive Democrat, how I think Democrats need to be stronger, let's be real. I got multi-million-dollar campaigns run against me. And they still run them against me. Every time I don't take a vote with the leadership, they say, why didn't you vote for that thing that Biden appreciated? Well, because sometimes we actually have to stand up to ourselves, and it's harder to stand up to your friends than it is to your enemies sometimes. So we have to help the Democratic Party to be stronger. But also, we have to call some people to go home. Listen, some people gotta go home. If you are uncomfortable in this moment, then this moment is not for you, and there is no shame in that. There's no shame in that. If you serve for 40 years, you served your time, and this isn't the moment where you're ready to stand up, fight back, scream, shout, hold the floor, and you're not willing to shut down sessions, then maybe it's okay to step aside. But we want to have those type of conversations about what it looks like to be bolder. I know that people right now, y'all know that we can't necessarily lead like an insurrection. That's the media. I'm not saying we should do an insurrection. The media. To the feds. But what I am saying is that I do know, that people want to hear us. They don't want to see us sitting on the House floor and kikiing with our Republican friends. They don't want to see us going on trips with them and having fun with them or playing in bipartisan sports with them when our democracy is at risk. And we still got folks who are playing bipartisan sports while our democracy is at risk. So those are some of the things that I would like to see. Those are some of the things that I'm asking for. And those are some of the things that I think the people are calling for. And because of that, I promise you, leadership is hearing it. And they're going to have to decide if they're going to ignore that from people. But I agree. I also want to see us all. I know that we don't have the House. We don't have the Senate. We don't have the White House. We don't have the Supreme Court. And that can all be very true. But we are not disempowered. We are not powerless. So right now, I would say a couple things that we should do, just really quickly. I'm so sorry. We need to communicate. We need to be communicating every single day. The reason why Republicans are able to get into your house is because they have access to media. They are killing us in the media. So they're killing us on legacy media, and they're also killing us on social media. So they are overwhelming us. That's why you're getting their messaging more. So it makes it seem like there is no counter argument. So we need the counter argument. We need the bills that are going to evidence that even though they're not going to get a vote, or even though they're not going to get to Trump, that we still have them, because that's our Project 2026. We need to have that crafted. We need to be very loud in communicating it. And that's how we give people, the last thing that I would say is the organizing. We all need to be organizers right now. And we need to do organizing both on the inside, and we need to support organizing on the outside. They have to go hand in hand. The biggest thing that I was afraid of with Democrats is this idea that we say sometimes that organizing is a lesser version, that sometimes we shun activism and organizing. But the reality is when you can't legislate, what do you have left? Activism and organizing. We need to welcome that. We need to encourage that, and we need to support it, and we need to lift it up, and we need to amplify it. We need to be in those spaces doing that. Every time we have a mic, we need to lift up the good works of Americans who are standing with us, standing in the gap where we can. And I think that when we demonstrate that, more people will feel like we're moving, where people will feel like something is actually happening, and that will help to get us out of this moment where we feel like everything is lost. All hope ain't lost, y'all. We're in the first quarter. There are more.
Okay, this question is from Gina Chen. If you are here, Gina Chen. The question is, I am a graduate student at CMU. What can both you as a Congress member and my colleagues, students and faculty at CMU, Pitt, and other universities do to protect our First Amendment rights beyond signing petitions and protesting?
That is one of the most important questions that we have, and I know it doesn't feel like it, but when we talk about a slipping democracy, the first thing that's under attack is your First Amendment. There is a reason why it's the first one. There's a reason why freedom of speech, of assembly, of religion, but speech and assembly in particular are the first ones. Because if you can train students, young people, which is the heartbeat of all movements, every movement that we've had through our history has been driven by student activism, by young people's activism, and joined in by other people, but led primarily by the energy, the ingenuity, and the bravery of young people. But what we've seen are attacks on that for a reason. Before I say what Congress can do, because listen, I've been very clear. I've been very clear about the importance of campus protests, very clear about the importance of First Amendment rights and not eroding them. And obviously, Mahmoud Khalil is a person who comes to mind, a student who was disappeared, and is now in a facility in Louisiana. And a lot of people because of the contention and the debate that is happening behind that, are missing the actual point of what we're really talking about, which that actually is not an instance just of Israel and Palestine. It's actually an instance of American citizenship, our rights, our civil liberties, and our freedom of speech. And that's why it's so important that we frame it that way and that we stop each other from cutting off that debate. It is really important. So as we've already discovered, he was the first, but he's not been the last. Since then, we've already seen attacks on green card holders. We've seen attacks on students. Columbia has already punished students by revoking degrees, but not returning money. I don't understand how that one works. But these are important conversations because it doesn't seem important when it's just students who are fighting their administration or who are even, fighting out against a topic that you might find comfortable or uncomfortable. But the problem is that when the real threat is keeping students, keeping you, keeping each and every one of us from speaking up against Trump, against the dictator, whoever that dictator may be, whoever that autocrat is. You cannot question the government. And people are afraid to do that now, which is truly, truly weakening us as a movement to be able to counteract what he's doing. There are so many things that he's doing that's illegal. And in those moments when our government is acting rogue, we rely on the people to be the final check and balance. But if we've allowed and we've handed over our First Amendment right, then we are not able to fight back. So students, I will say that your First Amendment right, your history is a storied history of activism, of action and organizing. You are a part of a long legacy from apartheid South Africa to the civil rights movement, to the women's suffrage movement, to the anti-Vietnam War movement, to so many more. But all of these movements will always come at a cost. It's never been without a price to pay. And especially when that price is steepest, is when we need you the most. But we also need the people who are not students to support them. So the thing that we need most is not actually the students signing petitions, sign them, but we need you, community members, to surround them. We need you to speak up when we have students who are right now facing charges for their activism. Do you know if you get a felony conviction, you can never run for office? They're cutting off a future generation of bold leaders that we need in times like this. We need you. We need you to speak out against that. We need you to protect those civil liberties. We need you to value those civil liberties. And also, yes, we also need people to be held accountable for the way we do our activism. That's true too. We do need to make sure that we're rooting out any part of our movements that are not to the benefit of all people, all of our people. And we will and we can call that out. But we will also call out attacks on our civil liberties. We can do both. We must do both. And it's important that we stay in this fight. Do not lean out right now. Do not tap out right now, but call each other in. Our coalitions are not perfect. They've never been. Now more than ever, they're not. But it's more important that we continue to engage those coalitions, that we continue to strengthen them, that we continue to have honest conversation and debate, and that we continue to make sure that we're keeping our eyes focused on what the true enemy is right now. And those are the threats to our democracy.
Thank you. The next question is from Shelley Tonti. Shelley had a list, but just we're going to pick one. What is being done, we'll pick two of them, what is being done to get Elon Musk out, and what is being done to take money out of campaigns?
Okay. The Elon Musk thing is the most bizarre situation that I've ever experienced. I can tell you that as an American and a student of history, not even I could have conceptualized that we would ever be in a position like we are right now. And when I talk about I think we've been underreacting, the moment that I realized that we had been grossly underreacting is, funny enough, when I saw Elon Musk in the Oval Office with his kid. That's just an imagery that you have never seen in the free United States of America. And it was startling, and it should be startling to you. Because we don't have, and I know a lot of people disagree with the words oligarch or things of that nature, but this is what that is. A government where people are able to buy their way into power and into influence. And that's what he's been doing. He has been purchasing his way into the White House. And we saw him do it step by step, but not just into the White House. He also purchases ways into your phone and onto your TVs. Losing Twitter losing social media is one of the deepest cuts that that Democrats, that anybody who is for democracy, irrespective of their political affiliation, have experienced. And we're going to have to address that, and we're going to have to find ways of counteracting that. I have a bill that we're working on right now. I don't think I'm allowed to say I have a bill. We have a bill that we are working on right now, for instance, because money in politics is really important to me. I think that if you care about environmental justice, or you care about common sense gun control, or you care about equitable funding for education, or whatever it may be that brings you to your politics, then money in politics should be the most important thing to you. Because right now, we are seeing historic levels of spending, and every election cycle, we are seeing it harder and harder for people, every voter, one person, one vote. That concept is being thrown away. We saw last year in 2 primaries, the most expensive House primaries in the history of the country. And every year, they spend more and more, over $20 million in primaries, hundreds of millions of dollars in general elections. We saw a candidate for president raise $1 billion. And still lost. So that type of money is corrupting. And had we not had Citizens United in the first place, had we, bipartisan Democrats and Republicans all stood up together and say we don't want the influence of that money in our politics, we wouldn't be where we are today. So one of the bills that we are looking, we have a couple actually that we're about to roll out, but one of them, for instance, is specifically for Elon Musk, right? That you should not be able to spend money on a candidate and then also buy yourself a job in the White House. That is a bill that we are looking to introduce. And yeah, we understand money is speech. Yeah, but there are limits on everything. And right now, where somebody was able to spend $100 million and then find himself in the Oval Office is unconscionable. And we can put a stop to that. We also want to make sure that we're overturning Citizens United. Corporations are not people. Corporations are not people. And they should not have more of a voice than you do. I am somebody who has been on the receiving end of millions and millions and millions of dollars. And they don't have to bet. They don't have to tell the truth. They can distort the truth, but they can get into your living rooms. They can get onto your phones. If you remember my first election, you probably remember it. You couldn't escape the ads because of how much money was spent. But there is no fact check that comes with a campaign ad. Right? There's no fact check that comes with any of the mailers that come onto your house. So we have to make it harder for people to buy our politics. And we know that the districts that is easiest to do it in are the poorest ones. Poor districts, working class districts. If we want to have a representative democracy, then we have to be serious about getting that sort of campaign dollars, those dollars out of our politics. And that's why that is the number one issue for me. Not that I don't care about racial justice or economic justice. Not that I don't care about the price of eggs. I absolutely care about the price of eggs. And I know that we're not changing that until we get them out of our politics.
Thank you. So there are so many questions.
I'm sorry, I'm going to move faster. I'm going to move faster.
I wasn't trying to hit Congresswoman. I was going to say that there are so many questions, and some we have tried to cluster to try to, answer as many questions as possible, at least in the spirit of those questions. So if you do not read your question fully, know that we are trying to parse them out so that we can, at least get to it to some degree. So I'm going to, in the spirit of this one, this is Joyce Rogers, Laura Santoro, Mary Pat Donegan, and William Harrison. I'm going to call these bread, butter community issues. Okay? So these questions get at what we can do to address the rampant gentrification, the buying up of vacant land in communities like that.
Yeah. That's okay.
This particular question gets at the large veteran and social security population in the community and being afraid that those benefits are going to be lost. So this is getting to medical needs, food, and the like.
Yes.
Okay. Then there's a specific question about, this is for Mary, because you are on the Ways and Means Housing Subcommittee, about the hub and what is going to happen with HUD on that committee to prevent the loss of HUD funding.
I'm not on a subcommittee, but we can still talk about it.
Not on that subcommittee, so there-
No, we'll come back. We'll still talk about it.
Okay. And last but not least, William Harris wants to know how we can get more residents and Black folks on sites in communities that look like the Hill District. And so I know that was like a broad cluster. So housing and HUD,
Veterans Affairs,
Veterans Affairs and social
gentrification and Social Security,
and gentrification.
certainly.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Housing is one of the most important issues to Pittsburgh and Western Pennsylvania. We know that because we pulled it consistently. So we know, we've talked to people across the region about housing, and it consistently comes up as one of the greatest fears. We've also seen a lot of fear-mongering, a lot of villainizing in the media about the unhoused population. And I think those things go hand in hand. Across the country, we are seeing a housing crisis. And Pittsburgh used to be a place where we were most livable. You remember those? But part of the reason why Pittsburgh was most livable is because we actually had one of the lowest costs of living. Housing was something that was a little bit more accessible compared to other places. Having lived in DC, I know how expensive apartments are. And when I saw apartments that were almost as expensive as DC in East Liberty, in Lawrenceville, and other places around the city, I knew we had a problem because Pittsburgh was one of those places that was supposed to be more stabilized. Well, we're not stable, and we're not treating housing like it's a human right. For the last 2 years, in our entire term, we have been dealing with private equity in our housing. You might have heard, just last night, actually, we had a renters town hall, where renters, people who are in units, from HUD units with vouchers, folks who particularly are in units that have a private firm that are running them, that own them, and are taking public dollars, but are not doing maintenance. They're not ridding these folks, these housing of things like rodents. Bed bugs. They have security issues. There are folks who got holes in the floor and they're falling through them and they're calling maintenance and they're just getting the runaround. So we've been trying to work with them, a lot of us, County Executive Sarah Morato's office, State Rep Latasha D. Mays, our council folks, and our mayor have all been trying to work with so many groups, housing advocates, and those tenants to figure out how do we not just hold them accountable, but how do we start to make laws that start to get to this? How do we get to this? And one of the bigger problems are, yes, we got private equity firms and developers who are gobbling up housing. They're gobbling it up. They're taking these houses and they're doing literally nothing. And a lot of them are getting public dollars to do it. HUD has to be enforced. We need to make sure that HUD has the tools, has the mechanisms to do oversight, has the mechanisms to ensure that folks like them are not able to get these houses across the country, that we're able to cut through the red tape to make sure that people, if their unit has no heat, that we can get them somewhere else. But the problem is that we have wait lists, and then we have a disempowered HUD. And Donald Trump, yeah, that is him. Oh my God. Donald Trump is right now threatening to shut down HUD field offices. Well, we're in the midst of a housing crisis here. They're trying to shut down the HUD field office, which is going to take away our ability to work on the ground to implement these programs, to hear from residents, and to make sure that we are building more houses, not fewer affordable houses. So that's the number one thing that we want to say, that we want to put that out there. We want you all to know that they're trying to shut down the HUD field office, and that can have devastating impacts. And they're trying to shut down field offices all over the country, which is an indicator that they're trying to deprioritize housing. And I say that because we have budget debates coming up. And as these budgets are being made, we have two at the same time. I know you all might have heard about the CR from last week. That's not even said and done. It's actually not done. We're going back into September to go back and try to do it again. And we're going to be doing next year's budget because we're that far behind. Because they can't get the votes. They don't have the votes. So I want to say that because it's not said and done. They don't have the votes. So we need to make sure that the Republicans and Democrats understand that housing is something that is a priority, not just to Pittsburgh, to everywhere. That everywhere housing is a priority, that making sure that people who live in these communities are able to stay. That's why we support programs like the Whole Home Repairs Program that my old sister, now County Executive, worked on extensively at the state level. We implemented it in Pittsburgh and it was successful. It was a program that gave housing grants out to people so that they can do repairs like their roofs or foundation issues. Those big things that keep you able to stay in your house. But we know that if they don't get done, that housing slips into blight, into disrepair, and then it multiplies and we lose that affordable housing. That was a program that works. And we want to make sure that we're fighting for dollars in the state and the federal budget for programs like that, that keeps people into their communities, especially our seniors, our elders who are being priced out of communities. We want to make sure, and we agree. Listen, I'm not going to get too political, but I agree with our mayor to make sure that we are doing things to make it easier for everyday people to get housing here, not easier for our developers to take more and cost and pay and charge more. Sorry. Yes, I do agree that we want people to come to Pittsburgh, but also I want to make sure that my grandma gets to stay in her community. I want to make sure that your grandma gets to stay in her community. I want to make sure that people have access to groceries and they have access to their medical needs in the communities that they are in, and that goes hand in hand. Veterans Affairs. We have one of the largest populations of vets here in Western Pennsylvania in the country. In the country. These are folks who served, they did their time, and they came home and they found that there was no health care that was sufficient for them. They found that there was no housing as we're in the housing crisis. And even as the government keeps putting money into the Department of Defense, into the Pentagon gets more and more and more and more. They fail audit after audit after audit after audit. And the thing that we actually should be doing is making sure that the people who do serve gets to come home and be taken care of. Right now, veterans are being hit twice. They're being hit once because they are a part of diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. Diversity, equity, and inclusion programs don't just make sure that black folks get jobs that we are very qualified for. They make sure that everybody gets jobs that they're qualified for. They make sure that employers cannot discriminate. They make sure that there are programs specifically for our veterans who should get priority in certain situations to get these jobs. That's what these programs did. And as he started to unwind them, we saw veterans out of jobs. The second part that they got hit is because a lot of veterans work in places like the VA. They are federal employees. And many people have been laid off because of those cuts to federal employees. And we want to make sure that people recognize that, stop letting them give you lip service. You can't be for our vets and then cut veteran services. You cannot be for our vets and then cut housing. You can't be for our vets and then not do anything about the cost of living in in our communities. Those things go hand in hand. And that's why you will never see me vote for a budget that cuts Medicaid. You'll never see me vote for budgets that are cutting these critical services, budgets that cut what the food bank are able to do. Because unfortunately, the food bank is the gap for so many of our veterans, so many of our disabled neighbors. It is the gap. And right now we saw those cuts be slashed in this most recent CR. And we want to make sure it's not slashed in the next budget. Because again, the fight is still on. Social Security is the same thing. They've already cut Social Security. It's important to know that. Just because something hasn't been cut de facto doesn't mean that it hasn't been cut in practice. We were just talking about a story of an elderly gentleman in the Pacific Northwest who was one of the people who fell victim to the idiocracy of Elon Musk and those babies that he has working for them. They were going through the Social Security rolls and they were like, these people are 250 years old. Well, this guy was 82. It was a mistake, but they didn't catch it because they don't know what they're doing. So they took this money, they cut him off, they said, you're dead because you can't be that old. They cut him off, they went into his bank account and they took the money out, took the money back. Now the problem is that this should be a simple mistake that's easily remedied. He's not 279 years old, he's 82. He's alive, he exists. Those are his benefits, he is entitled to them because he earned them. But now he can't get somebody on the phone because they've slashed the Social Security offices. So that's how they're still cutting these programs. It's not by cutting them in name, but by cutting the capacity to implement them. When we see these federal cuts, these aren't just bureaucrats. These are people who are implementing our everyday programs. They're making sure that our schools stay afloat. They're making sure that our taxes and tax season, that you get your tax returns on time. They're making sure that your Social Security benefits come through. They're making sure that our office has somebody to call when we help you with those things. And yes, that they can't re-implement it is because they don't want to. So that is a cut. They've already cut Medicaid, right? Now they're trying to say that, it's Joe Biden who did it. Be wary. When people ask us, why do you communicate so much? Why are you telling us the problem? What we're telling you, because believe it or not, a lot of people don't know. And what Republicans do well is they rewrite history. So instead of them being the people who cut Medicaid, they're going to say that, well, look, remember in that debate when President Biden accidentally said this, they cut and splice it, and they're already running ads that say that it was actually Joe Biden who cut Medicaid. We got to understand what's happening so that we don't go and make the same mistakes in 2 more years. So yes, we will keep telling you, we will use our platforms to lift these things up because that's part of how we protect them, but that's part of also how we re-implement them when they realize that there is an army waiting behind them when they touch our veterans.
The next question is from Dorothy H. Dotson. The second question was, what message should have been conveyed to people to illustrate that the Democrats are fighting for the everyday person?
Well, I think that some messages have to be conveyed in action. And I think that action looks like bravery and courage in situations where we should not be a rubber stamp to things. If I had to do something different or think of something different, I think that when Al Green was taken off the House floor, I think that leadership should have let us all out of here. And I think that we should have all stood up. Now, I'll say that we should have been there in the first place because if we don't go to these things, they just fill the seats. And we didn't want those seats filled either. But it doesn't mean that we should have stayed. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't have stood up for him. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't have also been standing up and saying, you don't have a mandate to cut Medicaid. We should have all been screaming it because every single time that there is a camera on us as Democrats is an opportunity to reach somebody who is not always reached. It's an opportunity to convey to somebody that we're there, that we hear you, that we understand the problems because that's what we're paid to do. We do understand the problems and we are working tirelessly on solutions, even if we recognize that we might not be the solution in that moment. Because sometimes we might not be the most immediate solution, but it doesn't absolve us of our responsibility to be there. It doesn't absolve us of our responsibility to be out front. So those are the things that I would like to see communicated out to people more. I would like to see more action items for people, and I know it's hard for us sometimes. So I'll give a couple action items that I think, because I actually do believe in the power of people. That is why the preamble starts with we the people. We're not the preamble, that's why our Constitution, we the people, because power is vested in people. In every election cycle, we give our power out in voting. We decide who we're going to give it to. In this election cycle, some people decided to give it to Republicans in the House, the Senate, the White House. So the only way that we can counteract that is by taking it back. You actually are allowed to take it back. You are allowed to take it back. So what I would like to say and what I think that the Democrats should be messaging is that we should be tapping into, if you are not an organizer, if you're a Democrat who is not a natural born organizer or a career organizer, like I was an organizer, then find the organizers. We need to find the organizers because they're doing critical work. When we think about the NIH, one of the things that we've been doing is we've been trying to focus in, help the media and help us, the electorate, focus in on the things that are important. There's been a flurry of stuff that comes in, the flooding the zone, right, as we call it. There's a reason they're doing that, and it's to try to keep us out of focus. How can you focus on NIH cuts if you're also focusing on ICE and immigration? How can you focus on ICE and immigration if you're also focusing on Medicaid and Social Security, or if you're also focused on, Elon Musk having all your data, or if you're focused on the Department of Education, and this to this. That's their plan. We can't necessarily tackle everything, but we can actually start to tackle everything one by one. So that's why we got together with our state legislators and other local elected officials to talk about Medicaid, because that's something that is meaningful to everybody across this Commonwealth. 3 million people in Pennsylvania rely on Medicaid for their health care or CHIP. 110,000 in PA-12, which means that we know that that's something that is important to everyone. And we needed you to know that that was happening. So we started to coordinate media to make sure that the media was getting that message out. The NIH has an incredible impact on our region, on our nation, on our world. Our economy, our ads and mads economy, is undergirded by NIH funding. If we cut NIH funding, then the economy of Pittsburgh starts to fail. And the economy of Pennsylvania starts to fail. Senator McCormick, do you want the economy of Pennsylvania to fail? I think he doesn't. Or I think he does represent us though. So does he want the economy of Pennsylvania to fail? So we needed to start to focus in on that. So we joined with Save Our Science rallies. Those aren't just rallies. Those are opportunities to bring light to things. When the media comes to things, they then put it out to you all, and then you all get to join the next one because now you know about it. And the more you know, the more you send back to the White House, back to Congress. I know people think that writing a letter isn't meaningful. You know, I wrote a letter, I called my congressperson, they didn't answer the phone. My people answer the phone. I just want to say, shout out to my staff. My staff, can you stand up? Carly is the person who answers your phone calls. She's on those phones every single day. And sometimes they are heavy. Rossi is my chief of staff. He's out in the district. Brandon is my district director. You will see him in every community, in district meetings and community meetings. He's out there. We have Valletta here, who is the person who helps with your caseload. She doesn't got to stand up, but Valletta helps with your caseload. She's making sure you get that passport at the last minute. She's making sure she's been helping people to work through the bureaucracy of Social Security and Medicare and Veterans Affairs. That's what our caseworkers do. Kyla is our comms person. She's making sure that the messages that you need to hear are getting to you, because too often Democrats are under messaging. We are under communicating, and our team wants to make sure that we are over communicating, because you have a right to know. You have to know, because you can't fight back against what you don't know. So our team works diligently to do those things, and we need the Democrats to be investing in teams like that all over the country. A lot of the work isn't going to be on the House floor, but it is in our district offices. It is in our staffs. It is in those town halls that we're doing. These matter, and they matter because they are helping you to organize. So I want you all to get organized. There are organizations that you can get with, irrespective of what you care about. If you care about housing, well, PA United has been working diligently with renters, with tenants. We're helping to organize those tenants. And that's why we were able to make sure that MB Affordable, who has the Homewood House, who has Monview Heights, which you might have heard about, those tenants who are living in deplorable conditions, they can never work with the government again because of that work. We did that. We in Pittsburgh made sure that these people who have housing all over the country can't do it no more, and are going to jail. That is the power of organized people in this country. So you get with them. If you're somebody who wants to know what the political actions are, we got Facebook groups that organize. Shout out to Steel, what do they call them now? Steel Phoenix, I don't want to get it wrong. Steel Phoenix. They have lists of actions that happen every day. Indivisible, with Tracy Baton and so many others who are organizing these critical actions that brought to light information like the NIH cuts to this town. These people are organizing, and they are making moves and changes. Get connected with those folks. If you want to know then next how you can get connected with the civil liberties organizations, where do you send your money? You can send it to those organizations that are doing the legal defense funds, because that is going to be a critical part of our defense. It is a part of the defense. This is not separate and apart. It's not like the legislators and then the lawyers. Right now, we're fighting for our democracy. It's everybody at once. So those lawsuits, all 130 of them, we got people reinstated because they took up those lawsuits. I'm on the task force right now for the civil litigations. So one of our liaisons to the AGs, the state's attorneys generals, to those civil liberties organizations, to make sure that our strategy is firm and that we're moving forward with these lawsuits, so that Trump has a stopgap, so that we're stopping him from doing those things. Well, those organizations need support, and look into the work that they're doing. These are actions that you can take today, that you can take right now. So this is things that we can start to channel that energy to. Boycotts, they exist. They cut off the diversity, equity, and inclusion. Well, those organizations need to feel your wrath if you don't believe that that was the right course. There are things that we can do today, but we have to get them out there, and we have to actually believe in the power of that organizing. And Democrats have to be a part of that, because we have to be organizers in this moment too. So that was a long way of saying that's what I want Democrats to be saying.
So I want to first just recognize Wise I believe is the pronunciation, and Linda Yerig. You both had questions about the NIH, which I believe got addressed relative to the funding for NIH. So I just wanted to recognize those questions.
Yeah, Pitt is the 6th largest institution that receives NIH funding. So just keep that in mind.
Okay. So listen, I'm a community person to my core, so I want to get as many of your questions answered. So I'm clustering them for that purpose, as I mentioned before. So with that said, Pam West Michael Tribune, David Salagaro, I'm sorry, I think I'm mispronouncing that.
And like 5 more of y'all.
And Sarah Reiser, all are quite worried about our democracy. And all of them have questions about how to actually engage what is the legislative power that can be utilized right now, what power can be leveraged in this moment to preserve a number of things that we talked about tonight. So I think the question is,
what can we do? What can we do? I thought that was going to be the first question. What can we do? So to engage the legislative power, I started by talking about the fact that we're co-equal branches of government. That is how our system is intended to work. And again, we cannot relinquish that unless we relinquish it. So when I think about the strategy, we are not down and out when it comes to Republicans. I know everybody, we get mad at us, the Democrats, because we sometimes are the only people who will listen. We sometimes don't expect the other party to listen or to act. But the reality is that Mike Johnson has a gavel. And he can decide what bills come to the table. He can whip his members. And right now, he has a very tenuous coalition. He does not have the votes. So when we talk about the legislative power that we did last year, we actually were able to do a lot to stop Republicans. Believe it or not, in a minority, Democrats stopped them. When Republicans were trying to take us over the debt ceiling limit, they were trying to tie that to their budget ask. We actually talked them off the ledge because they out-negotiated themselves. They did the same thing with the budgets when they tried to cut Medicaid, Social Security. We actually, from a minority, were able to stop them. And that's like unsung. We don't think about that a lot because sometimes you don't talk about the bullets that missed you. But a lot of bullets missed us in the 118th Congress because Democrats stayed organized and disciplined and Republicans were in shambles. That's actually the same scenario now, but they now have the Senate and they also have the White House. But the Republicans in the House, my Republicans, they have a smaller majority than they did last time, and they are still as in disarray. They don't have votes because they don't agree for a number of reasons. Because some people on one extreme want it to be worse, but this is the more important one. There are many Republicans who know they can't cut Medicaid. They know that they can't cut Social Security, and they are afraid. And right now, they're trying to decide if they're more afraid of Donald Trump or if they're more afraid of you. And what we need to say is that you need to be more afraid of us. So when I say that we're not down and out yet, they have something like a 3-vote majority. 3-4 Republicans can and will be the difference between whether or not we remain a democracy or whether or not we give all of our power as a co-equal branch to a dictator. So we need to be putting pressure on them. We need to identify them. And let me tell you something, some of those Republicans are right here in Pennsylvania. Because we have some Republicans who won by the slimmest margins in their races, both on the Senate side and on the House side. We have Republicans right now who are in districts that Biden and Harris both times won, or some that we can flip. And they are always on the list of people who are concerned about the bills that we're running. So we want them to know that they can come over to our side, that they can preserve our democracy. And if they don't, we want them to know that they will have no comfort, whether they're in D.C. or in their districts. And as a Democratic Party, we are also focusing on that, which is why you're going to be seeing ads go into their districts. When they go home, they're going to be met by ads that say, this person wanted to cut your Medicaid. This person voted for a dictator. This person is an insurrectionist who did not believe that in the rule of law. We're going to be doing that. And we also need people to be engaged in their constituents because that is incredibly powerful. So when we think about the first thing that we have, the first fail safe in our democracy are going to be 4 Republicans. That's the first thing. The second thing is the power of people. Again, I keep going back to this not because I'm absolving myself of power, but because you are more powerful. And I am most powerful when you are organized. So we're going to see actions, and they're going to escalate across the country because those are how we put parameters. On the day of the funding freeze, if you might remember it, when Donald Trump signed an executive order that said that we're going to freeze every federal grant and loan that exists. Well, Medicaid was one of them, and all the Medicaid portals shut down. And all over the country, in Democratic districts and Republican districts, we saw people stand up and say, what are you doing? And the first thing they had to do before the night was over was start to walk that back. That's the people putting a parameter on someone who's trying to be a dictator. The reason why he is ruling by executive order is because the Republican Party is actually weak. They can't rule by legislation because they don't have the votes. If they had the votes, we wouldn't need to see Donald Trump writing and signing his name all day, every day. He has to do it because he's not powerful enough to move his own party. He's still not powerful enough to move them. So we have to target those people and know who's actually behind this. So when we think, yes, so the House Republicans, we got to use the filibuster. We got to use it. Like, we got the tools. Y'all wouldn't get rid of it when we said that it was a relic of the Jim Crow era. And since it's still there, use it. So we got to put pressure on our Senate Dems to actually use the power that they have. It's ridiculous. So that's the second thing we got to do. We need them to do more. We need them to not back down. It is the leverage that they have. And in our next budget fight, we need the Republicans to know that it's not going to go down the way this last one did. That was weakness. And we can't afford to show weakness right now. We all know that we don't want to shut down the government. None of us wants to shut down the government. But more than that, I don't want you to be robbed. I don't want you to be abused and taken advantage of. And that's the mindset that we have to have right now. So that's number two. Ask them about that. Make sure that they are using the power that they have. And the third thing was you all, the power of you all and organized blocks. It may not be or feel like it's powerful when you call individually, but when you call as a collective, it actually does move people. We see Senator McCormick. He knows that he won by a vote and a half. He knows that. And he knows that it's not going to be easy to win again. But that's also power that we have as Pennsylvanians to say that we want you as our Republican senator who has access to the president, who has access to Republican leadership. We need you to be our eyes and ears, not theirs. So we need to make him decide, who does he serve? Does he serve Trump or does he serve you? Those are things that we need to do right now to fortify our democracy. And then we already talked about some of the other things like the civil liberties organizations.
Thank you. There were several questions about environmental justice, so I'm going to pick one. Low-income, this is from Tia Paris, low-income communities of color are disproportionately impacted by pollution. We're seeing how Trump's EPA is shutting down offices focused on environmental justice and trying to roll back pollution standards on power plants and cars and trucks. How are you going to fight these attacks? How can we fight with you?
Yeah, we've been fighting those attacks before Trump got here. And that's just the reality that sometimes when we see corporate abuse, that sometimes gets bipartisan support. Now, the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, it was really badly named. It was actually an investment in climate, in our environment, and sustainable development, things of that nature. It was actually really important. It did not go far enough. But in Western Pennsylvania, a community that is truly has scars from our past, our industrial past, it allowed us to be able to make investments and build on a new foundation that isn't tied to that. We were able to invest in sustainable development, even sustainable manufacturing. We were able to invest in green initiatives, planting trees. It actually matters. All of these initiatives that helps us. What we really need to make sure at both the state and the federal level is that we're not dismantling or we're not taking away from the EPA or the DEP, but they actually need more capacity, because no matter how many laws we have in place, if there's no enforcement mechanism, if there's no enforcement arm, then there's nothing to keep these corporations honest. And we know that they will not be honest because history tells us that they won't be. But when we have eyes on them, whether that's the county Department of Health, whether it's the EPA and the regional offices, which means if they have a regional office, that means that we have eyes right here in a region. This is a critical region. If we lose that, then that means that some of these industries will be able to kind of do things under the quiet of night that they used to be able to do in the past. We worked really hard to make sure that there were eyes on these industries. And unfortunately, a lot of that oversight came from the people. That oversight came from citizens' organizations. I think about in my home community, my old home community in North Braddock. I think about the North Braddock Residents for the Future and other organizations, GASP and the Breathe Project, and so many others who have made investments into being an accountability mechanism. And because they were on the case, we were able to get eyes on, U.S. Steel, for instance, or anyone else. So that's how I have fought back. That's how we have fought back as a community. And right now, more than ever, we're going to see environmental justice go by the wayside. Trump talks often about, hating the Green New Deal. He calls it wokeness. He ties wokeness and DEI and environmental advocacy all into one. And what they're trying to do is to normalize going back to an era where you can either have climate justice or you can have jobs and economy. And we have to be persistent in separating that narrative and persistent in building the narrative that actually Western Pennsylvania is the case study that we can have both. And our investments that we were proud to be able to work to bring back, we showed that in every investment. We were able to invest in like an energy sustainable battery company in Turtle Creek Valley, where people who live in Turtle Creek will now be able to work because of those investments. And that is still manufacturing, but it isn't dirty. We did both. You can have jobs and climate change. We were able to rebuild, make jobs through the Infrastructure Act. Every time they do something that disrupts your traffic on I-376, we know it's necessary, but we're doing it in a sustainable way and it creates jobs. That's infrastructure. When we rebuild bridges that shouldn't collapse in the wealthiest nation on earth, we now understand that if we invest in sustainability, not only will it last longer, it will stand up to weatherization, it will stand up to climate change, it will create good union jobs. So we want to push that narrative that Western Pennsylvania is the answer. How we've been tackling it here may seem like we had a big hole to dig ourselves out of, but we are doing it. And we've been able to do it through the federal government and federal investments. So no, I say that because I am worried about it, because I don't know the answer here. Because I don't know how we can focus this administration on not dismantling these things. I don't know the answer. But I do know that the answer lies in the activism and the organizing that we've done, and it lies in the ways that we've used the federal investments so responsibly that we have used. That has to be a case study here.
Because of the work that we do in the Hill District, I wanted to give voice to these questions for Congresswoman. They came in later than a lot of others, so I'm not asking you to answer it, but I do want to give it voice. And whoever asks these questions, I ask for you to, expect follow-up from the office. This question is specifically, and comment is specifically about seniors. How can your team help all seniors to live in renter housing, get their rent rebate refund, and stop being rejected because they are not living in a home, a house, but still paying to make their rent. So that's something that I'm going to actually get back to because we have another customer.
Well, I can actually answer that very quickly. Your state rep are the people who do that. That's the answer. It's just go to your state reps.
So state reps.
They run the rent rebate program. They do a lot of work on it, and they're very good at it.
Okay. This one is more about the area median income, which is designated by the area in which you live and how the rents are determined. When will the area median income be changed to ethically and honestly be affordable housing? So that's an important question that I'm going to ask. Your office is going to get all of these questions everyone who is not able to get answered tonight. That's probably a federal question, an accounting question, an important question nonetheless. It is a very important question. Okay, so I'm going to do this last clustering, and I think that's going to be, and then we'll close after that. So please stay after the Congresswoman answers this final clustering. This last clustering of questions is geared towards federal agencies and or services. Okay, so this is Val Weller. I have to give a shout out to Aiden Drugger because he's a high school sophomore and he wants to know how young he is. Okay. So that's just Mark Mancini, Nicole Patterson, Serenity Klemp, Annie Rainey, and funding and protecting public schools,
Yep.
or they want to know if the state will fly.
No.
Federal Aviation Administration, or they want to know if you are supportive of House Resolution 70 regarding the privatization of the post office, and if you are not yet knowledgeable about all of the details of that,
I got it.
the bottom line is they don't want to.
Yeah, I got it.
And want to know if that's going to be protected. And then there is a federal employee here who wants to know what they can do to protect their job and their interests. So again, this is that the status of those federal agencies. Thank you.
Okay. This is a really unfortunate time to have to fly twice a week. God, I'm horrified. I'm just not even gonna lie. I am horrified. Because there are cuts to the FAA. There are cuts to folks who are working in the towers. And I'm not a conspiracy theory. I do not have the answer for why these planes are falling out of the air. I do not know. But I do know that in times like this, we are supposed to have confidence in our government, not fear that they're going to make it worse. And I know too many people who fear that it's going to be worse. If this had happened at any other time in history, the reaction immediately wouldn't have been, is there a DEI in the cockpit? It would have been, we are going to take every measure to make sure that the skies are as safe as we know them to be, and to keep them safe and to make them safer. That's the type of leadership that a president is supposed to offer. When we have insecurities or when we're scared, he's supposed to come in as a sound voice and say that we're not going to fire more people. We're going to hire the best, and they know what they're doing, and that we are going to be on the front lines of securing whatever it is that we're doing. And we are, unfortunately, in a time in our country's history where we can't say that we feel that security. Department of Education, public schools. That was a question, right?
Public schools and busing.
Busing. Okay. I haven't heard a busing question in like a few decades. But public education is really important to me. I went to a public school. I went to public school from K to 12 and through freshman to senior year. I went to Woodland Hills. I went to a public school that is underfunded. And in that public school, I found sports and music. I got to learn how to play the clarinet, the bass clarinet, and the tenor saxophone, and then learn how to direct the band. I learned how to play basketball and run and use the blocks and track. I learned how to read and to write. I learned how to be a congressperson. It prepared me to go to law school and be successful there. But not just me. Public schools serve all students. And it doesn't, that's worth clapping for, because public schools serve all students. Public schools serve students who are transient or unhoused. That student who is in foster care and maybe doesn't, have two parents to advocate for them. It serves the kids with disabilities, no matter what that disability is. The IDEA, I know that the wrestling lady doesn't know what the IDEA is. But it is an important piece of federal legislation that ensures that every single child has access to a free and appropriate education. Because the reality is that some schools do not take kids with disabilities. They will not educate them. They cannot educate them. When we privatize and we use vouchers, we're using public dollars to discriminate against other people. And that does not mean that public schools are perfect. It means that we have work to do. It means that at every level of government, we need to be making sure that dollars are being used appropriately. We need to make sure that we're cutting through bureaucracy that doesn't work. That if testing doesn't work for students, then we shouldn't continue to invest in it. We can make changes to public education that serves all children. But if we cut and we gut public education, then that means that any child can be left behind. Every child can be left behind. And I know that you think it isn't going to be yours. But if your child makes it and your neighbor's child doesn't, what does that mean for the future of America? What is a country that doesn't invest in education, or a country that doesn't invest in healthcare? I said that that's not a country that's investing in its future. So when we talk about busing, I go back to my school. My school is a desegregation case. My school was a desegregation case in the 80s. You remember the Titans? We're that. Decades later, Because sometimes the government is the only mechanism that we have to ensure that we don't have discrimination. So it is important that students go to schools that are equitable, they go to schools that are diverse. Every child benefits from a diverse education, from diverse teachers, from diverse curricula, from diverse worldviews. We all benefit from that. It makes our country safer, it makes our country stronger, and it makes our country more competitive. And if our administration believes in national competitiveness, they talk about China a lot. Well, how are we going to be globally competitive if we're not investing in STEM education? How are we going to be globally competitive if we're saying that we want those kids to have it, but not those kids? You don't see other countries doing that. They invest in all kids because a high tide lifts all ships. That's what public education is. What was the other question? I don't understand the busing question. I got bussed. I don't know.
Let me clarify the question about busing.
Okay.
The question is, how can we prevent more closures of schools?
Oh, okay. Oh my God. I was like, I don't understand the busing question. Yeah, I don't actually. So the Pittsburgh Public Schools. Yeah, because Pittsburgh Public Schools and the proposal to close a lot of schools, and sometimes when we see those. And public transportation. Okay, yeah, a lot of schools. So this is actually going to be a very difficult question because one of the problems that school districts have with public transportation is actually charter schools. And I know a lot of people don't want to hear that. It actually costs, anytime a child goes from a public school to a charter school, the money follows. But they also, if that public school is a school that buses, that means they have to pay extra to bus a kid that doesn't go to their school anymore. So the buses actually cost a lot of money, and that's why we see a lot of districts that actually just don't have buses, because they can't afford to pay for both their kids to be bused and other kids to be bused. So that is a really intricate thing. This is a state level policy, state dollars, and how we spend it. Our courts, our Commonwealth courts in Pennsylvania deemed our funding scheme to be unconstitutional. And at the state level, they have to go back to the drawing board to figure out what is a more equitable way to fund public education that is not actually overburdening in property tax, so homeowners and renters, but is instead getting out more equitably, because we have school districts that have vastly more by your zip code than others. So we have school districts that actually don't bus, not because they don't want to, because it's expensive. The cuts, I am actually concerned about cuts, right? We know that people want schools in their neighborhoods. Black kids deserve to go to schools that are also in their neighborhoods. Black kids, brown kids, poor kids should not always be sent to other schools. And too often when we do cuts, we are usually cutting, those are the first ones that are on the chopping block. Too often when we see schools that are in disrepair, my Republican colleagues on the Ed and Labor Committee talk a lot about COVID and those COVID era when, well, these schools didn't open up fast. These schools open up much faster than these schools. This public school gets this much money, but they didn't open. Yeah, because it actually costs more to educate kids in poverty. Because the schools in Pennsylvania have asbestos and lead and heating and cooling issues. It's actually very hard to educate somebody in a pandemic if you can't ventilate the rooms. So the investments that we need to make in the infrastructure of our schools, we have schools that kids go to that if it was a government building, we would not work in it. You would not work in it. They would be called uninhabitable if there were anybody else going but kids and teachers and staff. And as a state and as a federal government, we should be ashamed. We should not have schools like that. So even as we're talking about closing schools, we got to also talk about fixing schools. We got to talk about replacing them, right? If they are in disrepair, then that doesn't mean that they just go and this neighborhood is now out of luck. I think that is a really important question. I think we're going to hear that debate a lot because the parents in Pittsburgh, and not just Pittsburgh Public, but parents across the Commonwealth have been really, really engaged in that. And that is the answer right now, is that engagement is most critical right now. So I know that everybody can't go to school board meetings every time. You work, you have other obligations, and it's unreasonable to expect you all to always be able to go to town halls or school board meetings. But we do have to find ways of registering our concern. We have to find ways of, bringing ideas to the forefront or saying, hey, I need to understand that idea a little bit better, especially as we see other people using school boards to do other things. So those go hand in hand, that sort of engagement. I like to think that the people, the school board members that we have sent on our behalf to care for our students will listen to the concerns that we have and will explain out the parameters that they have. But we have that right to be able to get that information. We have the right to be in that conversation about which schools are open, which schools are closed, about how we can collectively save some of these schools. But a lot of this comes down to funding. And as we talk about the Department of Education being eliminated, we are talking about the federal government possibly not being that support structure that we need now more than ever. The states have dismantled public education funding in Pennsylvania and have been doing it for decades. And we've never replaced the level of funding that we had pre-Tom Corbett, if you remember that guy, pre-him. We've not replaced that level of funding, which means that school districts around in the poorest areas are still not getting the dollars that they need to be able to do everything that they can. And they're making dollars stretch, and they're doing the Lord's work with them kids. But the state isn't doing its part to fund public education. And when we got a rainy day fund and we're not using that rainy day and it is pouring down raining and we got tarps over top of us, that's what that is for. So we need to see state engagement right now. So that's where you go to the state, because that's where they dictate in the budget where dollars come, whether those dollars come to this school or that school, how we do funding schemes. And that's going to be a really important conversation happening there. Okay. Thank you all so much. I'm sorry. I was going to say, I'm so sorry for any questions that I didn't get to. Wait a second. I'm so sorry for any questions that I didn't get to. Again, if you have those pressing questions, this is not the last time, the last opportunity that you have to ask them. We want to answer them. We want to get them back out to you. We want to continue to engage. So this won't be the last time we do this. Please come out, send somebody else the next time. Continue to engage us on all of our social media platforms. I'm Rep Summerlee and I'm Summer for PA on other things. We have about 5 offices. So our brick and mortar is in East Liberty at 211 North Whitfield, I think. We have other ones. We just opened up a satellite office in Monroeville. We have one in Beachview. We have one in Jeanette. We have one in Bethel Park. So those are offices that we have opened up to make sure that it's easier for you to access us. But we will go to you where we can. So you can reach us at those places. My staff is, of course, here. Our phone numbers exist. We have little handouts that tell you what services we do that we can help you with. Please share that information out with other people and continue to stay tuned in. But before we get here, I hope that you don't leave discouraged. I hope that you leave recognizing that this game is not over, and that our democracy is worth fighting for, and that we have power in our communities to stand back up, that we will not be backing down from Donald Trump or anybody else who stands in our way. And I feel encouraged because I know that this community backs what we are doing. So PA 12 will be heard in Washington, D.C. PA 12 will be heard in the Democratic caucus, it'll be heard on the floor, and it'll be heard in everything that we do. So thank you for taking the time to share with us.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Thank you. Please wait. Before you leave,